All right, so today we are going to do a deep dive into Proverbs 3.56.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah, trust in the Lord with all your heart.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to be taking a look at a YouTube video from Rethink Simple Bible Teachings.
Yeah.
And I think this is going to be a really good one because, sometimes it can feel like, okay, yeah, trust in the Lord, I get it, but how do we actually apply this to, like, real life,
Yeah, that's true.
And I think that this video does a really good job of breaking it down and giving us those practical handles, so to speak.
Okay, yeah, I'm excited.
But before we jump into the verse itself, I think it's helpful to take a step back and look at the book of Proverbs as a whole.
Okay.
Like, what makes it so unique?
Well, Proverbs is kind of like a book of wisdom.
Right.
Like all these kind of fortune cookie wisdom.
Yeah.
But with like more depth than a fortune cookie.
Right.
Like it's not really like a story or a set of laws. It's more like you're having a conversation with somebody who only speaks in like really insightful one-liners.
I love that.
About like how to live a life that aligns with God's will.
Okay. Yeah.
That's a good way to think about Proverbs.
So it's not about finding some kind of like magic formula for success or happiness.
Right.
But more about aligning ourselves with like a deeper wisdom.
Yeah.
Okay, and what makes it so powerful then?
Well, it's because it's not about like quick fixes or easy answers. It's about developing a mindset.
Right.
A way of approaching life that leads to true fulfillment.
Okay, I like that a lot. All right, so with that in mind, how does Proverbs 3.56, how does it fit into all of this? Like, what is the context surrounding this verse?
Well, Solomon,
okay,
the wisest guy in the Bible, he is he's talking about like finding peace. That kind of deep, abiding sense of peace.
Right.
That goes beyond your circumstances. He's basically saying, like, hey, if you want to experience this kind of peace, trust in the Lord with all your heart. It's like he's presenting trust as like the key to unlock a life that isn't ruled by anxiety and fear.
It's interesting because I think we often think of peace as something like external, right? Like a calm environment or lack of conflict. But it seems like what he's talking about here is this internal peace, this peace that comes from like trusting in something bigger than ourselves.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head.
Okay.
It's about that deep-seated confidence that even when things are chaotic around us, we have an anchor.
Right.
We have a source of stability that can't be shaken.
I like that. Okay, so let's unpack the verse itself.
Okay.
The first part says, trust in the Lord with all your heart. Seems pretty straightforward, but like, what does it actually mean to trust God with all our hearts?
Yeah.
Is it just about believing in him, or is there more to it?
It's definitely so much more than just mental assent.
Right.
It's about actively placing our confidence, our hope, our very being, like in God's hands.
Okay.
Think of it this way. Deciding to follow Jesus.
Okay.
Isn't just like saying, yeah, I believe in him. It's about taking concrete steps.
Okay.
Changing our behaviors, aligning our lives with his teachings.
Right.
Trusting God is similar.
Okay.
It requires action, a willingness to surrender control and let him lead.
So it's not like a one-time decision.
Yeah, no.
It's like this daily, moment-by-moment choice to say, okay, God, I'm trusting you with this.
Precisely.
Okay.
And that all your heart part is crucial.
Right.
It's not about picking and choosing which areas of our lives we trust God with.
Yeah.
It's about complete surrender.
Okay.
Acknowledging that his wisdom surpasses our own in like every aspect of our lives.
Okay. That makes sense, but it also feels kind of daunting. Like, are we really supposed to never rely on our own understanding?
Yeah, it's definitely a challenge.
Like, isn't that a bit unrealistic?
And you've hit on like a tension that lies at the heart of this verse. It's this constant dance between trusting God and using the brains he gave us.
Right.
The video actually uses this great image of leaning back on our old ways of thinking and doing things.
Right.
Even after we've taken a step towards trusting God, it's like we instinctively reach for those familiar crutches, those comfortable patterns of behavior, even when we know deep down that God's way is better.
I can definitely relate to that.
Yeah.
It is so easy to fall back into old habits, especially when things get tough.
Right.
But are you saying that we should never use our own judgment or try to figure things out for ourselves? Like, where's the balance?
That's a great question, and one we'll definitely explore further.
Okay.
But for now, I think the key takeaway here is that trust involves a conscious effort to resist that urge to lean back.
Right.
to constantly remind ourselves that God's wisdom is ultimately greater than our own limited understanding.
Okay, so it's about recognizing our own limitations.
Right.
And being willing to surrender control even when it feels uncomfortable or counterintuitive.
Exactly.
But how do we actually do that?
Yeah.
How do we move from simply believing in God to actively trusting him with our whole hearts?
That's the million-dollar question.
Yeah.
And that's what we'll delve into next.
All right, so stay tuned.
Yeah, it's going to be good.
We'll be right back.
Mm-hmm.
So we've been talking about this idea of trusting God with all of our hearts.
Right.
And it is like more than just a feeling.
Yeah, for sure.
It is an active choice, like this continual surrender. But how do we actually make that choice when we are facing like real challenges?
Yeah.
Like what do we do when anxiety is hitting?
Yeah.
Or when we are feeling like we are drowning in uncertainty?
That's where like the rubber meets the road.
Right, exactly.
And I think the video gives us some really practical like handles for navigating those moments.
Okay.
It starts with this simple yet like profound idea of like handing our worries over to God.
Like in 1 Peter 5.7, where it says, cast all your anxiety on him because he cares for you.
Exactly.
But in practice, it can feel really hard to actually let go of those anxieties, you know?
Yeah, for sure.
Like, how do I actually stop my brain from just spiraling into, like, worst-case scenarios?
Well, it's definitely like a practice, not a one-time fix.
Okay.
One thing that's helped me is like becoming more aware of my thought patterns.
Okay.
When I notice that like worry monster is starting to rear its ugly head,
Yeah.
I try to consciously pause and like redirect those thoughts.
Okay.
It's like having this like mental worry basket
Mm-hmm.
where I can place those anxieties and then hand that basket over to God.
So instead of trying to, like, wrestle those worries into submission on my own, I
Right.
am acknowledging them, but then I am choosing to trust God with them.
Exactly.
Okay.
It's not about denying our feelings or pretending everything is fine.
Right.
It's about recognizing our limitations
Mm-hmm.
and choosing to place our trust in someone who is bigger than our fears. And it doesn't have to be some elaborate ritual.
Right.
Sometimes it's just a simple whisper, God, I'm freaking out about this. Please take it.
Okay, so it is like building that muscle memory of turning to God first
Yes.
instead of letting those worries run the show.
Right.
But, you know, for a lot of people, including myself, I think the struggle to trust is often tied to this feeling that we do not really know God very well. Like,
Yeah.
how can I trust someone I do not have a deep relationship with, you know?
That's such an important point.
Yeah.
Trust is built on relationship.
Okay.
And that's where the video's emphasis on connecting with God regularly comes in.
Okay.
The more time we spend in prayer, reading scripture, meditating on his word,
Mm-hmm.
the more we get to know his character, his
Yeah.
heart, his faithfulness.
Okay.
And the more we get to know him, the easier it becomes to trust him.
So it is like any other relationship. The
It's
more
not-
we invest in it, the stronger it becomes.
Yes.
Okay, but what about those times where we are doing all of the right things? Like we are praying, we are reading the Bible, but we still feel lost and confused. Like what about those situations where we desperately need wisdom, but we just do not know what God wants us to do?
The age-old question of discerning God's will.
Right.
Well, I think it is important to remember that God isn't like a vending machine
Okay.
where we put in our good deeds and out pops a clear answer.
Right.
Sometimes his guidance is more like a gentle whisper,
Okay.
a nudge in a certain direction,
Mm-hmm.
or a growing sense of peace about a particular decision.
So it is not always about like finding that neon sign pointing the way.
Right.
It is more about paying attention to those subtle cues,
Yeah.
that inner compass that God is trying to calibrate.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that calibration process often involves like seeking wisdom from multiple sources.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
We need to be in the Word, listening for that still small voice,
Mm-hmm.
but we also need to be wise about seeking counsel from like trusted mentors, people who have a track record of walking with God.
Yeah.
And can offer like a different perspective on our situation.
It is about recognizing that we do not have all of the answers
Right.
and being humble enough to ask for help.
Mm-hmm.
But even with all of that, there are times when we still feel stuck.
Yeah.
Like we are just going in circles.
Right.
What do we do when we have prayed, we have sought counsel, we have searched the scriptures, but we are still waiting for that clarity, that breakthrough?
That brings us to what might be like the most challenging aspect of trusting God,
Okay.
waiting patiently on his timing.
Mm-hmm.
And it is something that many of us, myself included, struggle with big time.
Yeah.
We live in a culture of instant gratification.
Right.
We want answers now, solutions now, breakthroughs now. But God often works on a different timetable.
Right. And that can be so frustrating, you know?
Yeah, for sure.
Like, if God knows what is best, why doesn't he just tell us and get on with it?
Right.
Why all the waiting and the wondering?
That's where we have to like dig deep and remember that God's ways are not our ways. And his thoughts are higher than our thoughts.
Right.
He sees the bigger picture, the long game, in a way that we simply can't.
So are you saying that the waiting is like part of the process?
I think that is a huge part of it.
Okay.
And, the video actually touches on this idea.
Okay.
That while we are waiting, God is often working behind the scenes, doing things we can't even perceive yet.
Right.
It's like those behind the scenes clips you see for movies.
Okay. Yeah.
There is so much happening that we are not aware of, but it all comes together in the final product.
Okay. I am starting to see where you were going with this. So maybe those waiting seasons are not just like empty spaces where nothing is happening.
Right.
Maybe there are actually times of like intense preparation.
Yeah.
Where God is refining our character, shaping our faith, and maybe even orchestrating events in the lives of others that will eventually connect with our own journey.
It's a humbling thought, isn't it?
It is. It is.
We are not the directors of our lives. We are actors in a much grander story, and God is like the ultimate storyteller.
Right.
He is working on a masterpiece even when we can't see the full canvas.
Yeah.
And sometimes the waiting is part of what makes the final reveal so breathtaking.
That is a really powerful image.
It is.
But still, how do we practically navigate those seasons of waiting?
Yeah, that's a good question.
How do we shift our perspective from like frustration to faith? I think that is something that a lot of our listeners are probably wrestling with.
You're right. It is a struggle many of us face.
Yeah.
And I think the video offers some really insightful guidance on how to make the most of those waiting periods.
Okay, I am all ears.
Right.
I think we are ready to dive into that in the final part of our deep dive. All right, so we are back, and we are talking about this whole idea of waiting patiently on God. And we have talked about how, these waiting seasons can actually be times of intense preparation.
Right.
And even a part of God's bigger story that is unfolding. But honestly,
Waiting can be so hard.
It is.
It is like that saying, good things come to those who wait.
Right.
But like, what about when we are in the middle of something tough?
Yeah.
And we are longing for something that we desperately want? How do we actually wait with faith?
Right.
Instead of just getting stuck in like frustration and anxiety.
Yeah. You've hit on a real tension there.
Right.
Waiting often requires a level of trust that feels, well, superhuman,
Right.
It's about choosing to believe that God is working even when we can't see it, that he has a plan even when we do not understand it, and that his timing is perfect, even when it feels agonizingly slow.
It's like we're standing in a pitch black room and like fumbling for a light switch. We know it's there somewhere, but we can't find it. All we can do is trust that the light will come on eventually, even if it takes a while.
And that darkness you described, it can feel pretty overwhelming at times. It's tempting to give up hope, you know?
Yeah. To start doubting God's goodness or his faithfulness.
Right.
But those are the moments when we need to like cling to his promises, remind ourselves of his character, and trust that he's working even in the hidden places.
The video really emphasized that, that waiting seasons are never wasted seasons.
That's good.
It's like these times are like crucibles where God is refining our faith, shaping our character, and preparing us for what's to come.
It's like the director is working behind the scenes of a movie, while the audience is waiting for the plot to unfold. The director is setting the stage, developing the characters, and building suspense. And all that behind the scenes work adds to the impact of the final product.
So if we're in a waiting season right now, like how can we make the most of it?
Right.
How do we shift our perspective from frustration to faith?
Yeah.
And even like find purpose in the waiting?
Well, there are a few things we can do.
Yeah.
First, remember you are not alone in this.
Right.
Countless people throughout history have gone through these seasons of waiting.
Okay.
And they emerged with a deeper faith and a greater understanding of God's character.
Okay.
We can draw encouragement from their stories, from the Psalms where David pours out his heart to God.
Right.
And those raw moments of longing and uncertainty. And from all those biblical accounts of God's faithfulness to his people.
It's like we have this whole cloud of witnesses cheering us on, reminding us that we are not the first to walk this path.
Right.
And that God has always been faithful.
Exactly.
Okay.
Another helpful practice is to focus on what you can control.
Okay.
We can't control God's timing,
Right.
but we can control our response to the waiting.
Right.
We can use that time to deepen our relationship with Him
Okay.
through prayer, Bible study, worship.
Mm-hmm.
We can also focus on serving others using our gifts and talents
Right.
to make a difference in the world around us.
It's like we are being given this opportunity to work on our spiritual fitness, to
Yeah.
build those muscles of faith and resilience that will sustain us through the challenges to come.
Right.
And when those answers do finally come, we'll be stronger,
Yeah.
more prepared to receive them.
Exactly. It's not about passively sitting around hoping for the best.
Right.
It's about actively engaging with God and with the world around us.
This has been incredibly insightful.
Yeah.
I think for me, the biggest takeaway is that even though waiting is hard, it is not meaningless.
It's not.
God sees us in our waiting. He knows our hearts. He hears our prayers.
Yes.
And He cares about our pain.
Absolutely. He's not indifferent to our struggles.
Right.
And He's not ignoring our cries. He is working even when we can't see it.
Right.
And He has a plan for our lives that is far greater than we can imagine.
So if you are in a waiting season right now,
Yeah.
take heart. God is with you. He has not forgotten you, and He has not abandoned you. He is working, even in those hidden places.
He is.
And He will bring beauty from ashes.
He will.
Just keep trusting.
Yeah.
Keep seeking Him.
Keep hoping.
And keep waiting patiently on His perfect timing.
And remember, the very act of waiting on God is an act of worship.
Wow, that is good.
It's a declaration that we trust Him more than our circumstances, that we believe in His goodness,
Right.
and that we're willing to surrender our timeline to His sovereign will.
That's such a powerful way to reframe it.
It is.
It's not about passively sitting around, twiddling our thumbs. It's
Right.
about actively choosing to trust God.
Yeah.
Lean into Him and believe that He's working all things together for our good.
He is.
When we look back on our lives,
Yeah.
we might even find that those waiting seasons were the times when we grew the most,
Right.
when our faith was refined, and when we learned to depend on God in a deeper way.
It's like that saying, pressure makes diamonds.
Yeah.
Those times of pressure, those seasons of waiting,
Right.
can actually be the catalysts for incredible spiritual growth and transformation.
And as we emerge from those seasons,
Yeah.
we will find that we are not the same people we were before.
That's true.
We'll have a deeper understanding of God's character,
Yeah.
a stronger faith,
Yeah.
and a greater capacity to trust Him in all circumstances.
That's so good.
Wow, we have covered so much ground in this deep dive.
I know we've
From
had.
the unique nature of Proverbs to the practical steps that we can take to actually cultivate trust in God. It's been an incredible journey.
I agree.
And it all comes back to Proverbs 3.56.
Right.
Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways, submit to Him, and He will make your path straight.
That's the one.
It's a simple verse,
It is.
but it holds the key
Mm-hmm.
to a life of peace, purpose, and fulfillment.
So as you go about your day,
Yeah.
as you face those inevitable challenges and uncertainties, remember this: you are not alone. God is with you. He sees you. He loves you.
Yeah.
And He is working all things together for your good.
And one last thought to chew on as we wrap up our deep dive.
Okay.
What if those waiting seasons aren't just about preparing us for something in the future?
Right.
What if they're also about the present moment? What if God is inviting us to find joy and peace in the waiting itself,
Yeah.
to experience His presence in the midst of the unknown,
Yeah.
and to discover the beauty of simply being with Him
Yes.
right here, right now?
That's a beautiful thought to leave our listeners with.
It is.
It's a reminder that God's presence is a gift,
Yeah.
not just a destination. And that even in the waiting, even in the uncertainty,
Right.
we can experience His peace, His joy, and His love.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Yeah, this was great.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep trusting.